Hello, welcome. Thank you for joining me. My name is Lauren, and we will be practicing a gentle yoga sequence today with a focus on hip flexors. So shout out to Marty. This was a Marty suggestion, recommendation, and thank you so much, Marty, for suggesting this because in creating the sequence, I found a lot of really neat stretches and some ways to get into my hip flexors that I really sort of hadn't before. So thank you for that suggestion. It worked out in everyone's favor, I guess. So our hip flexors, taking one step back, is the muscle that's in front of your hip. It's a group of muscles that connect the leg to the torso. So one way to check in with your hip flexor to notice is it stretching, is it shortening, what's happening with your hip flexor in that moment. If there is a crease here, your hip flexor is shortened. So anytime we can lengthen the space, get rid of creases, wrinkles, folds, even in clothing, then we're lengthening hip flexors. So in lengthening this and getting rid of creases and allowing this space to lengthen, a lot of what I'll be asking you to do is tuck the tailbone. So throughout this, again, tucking the tailbone, belly button to the face with the intention of lengthening here. Sort of think about lengthening from your knee to like the top of the hip, because we're also going to get into the quads, the tops of the thighs. So you'll be feeling a lot sort of in this space and then also getting into the inner thighs sometimes too. So lots of hip stuff. And even backing up a little bit more, hip flexors are tight on most people, not just Marty. Hip flexors are tight on most people. Again, anytime there's this crease here, your hip flexor is shortening. So sitting, if you do a lot of walking, running, bike riding, the elliptical, again, anything where your knee is lifting up off the ground or there's a crease here. Another really common thing that gets hip flexors tight, and this is something that I'm working on, is sleeping on your side. So if you sleep on your side in a super tight, tucked fetal position, this is what I want you to think about working on, and I'm doing this as well. Instead of being this tight little compact ball, can you lengthen out just a little bit? Can you draw your knees even just a few inches away from your belly to create more space? Again, if this is a really tight, deep fold, your hip flexor is just shortening. So can you lengthen it a little bit? Can you reduce that fold, reduce that crease, even just a little bit throughout your day? Think about doing that off of your mat. Okay, so all that about hip flexors, we're gonna get to it. You do need 2 blocks for this practice, or 2 supportive things that we're gonna use right away, but then you do need something for a supported bridge later, so probably a block. So you'll need some props, but we are gonna get started, and we're actually gonna get started in a little bit of a different way. We're gonna start in butterfly pose in Supta Baddha Konasana. So not a super complicated setup. I'm gonna support my head, and then I'm gonna use a block under each leg. So you might have 3 things around you, but I do want your legs supported in this butterfly pose. We're just starting to tap into the hips. So we don't want to ask them to do this pose without the support. We need the prop. So you do need to support your legs in this pose. It can be with a blanket, pillows, whatever. This one, we're not picky about this one. But come on down into your back. Again, set yourself up in butterfly pose, Baddha Konasana. So coming down into your back again, maybe supporting your head, maybe not. Starting with your knees bent and your feet flat. Just let the knees drop away from each other, opening through the hips and the inner thighs, letting the bottoms of the feet come together. Now again, supporting the outsides of the thighs with the blocks at any height. We're not looking for our deepest, most intense stretch. Truly, it is clearly the very first thing we're doing. So this is just meant to just ever so slightly say hello to your hips. We're just saying hello, a little wave. We're not getting into them too deep, okay? Now, what I always like to do here in this pose is bring my hands to my low belly. It feels natural, but your arms can be alongside your body. We are gonna, of course, come into the breath, so maybe you have one hand on the belly, one hand on the chest, whatever allows you to really tap in inside and internally. So hopefully you are comfortable enough, you can let your eyes softly close and just settle in. And let's start with a few breaths, sort of washing everything away. Wash away the day, the week, the month, the year, anything that you feel like is clinging to you, hanging on to you, things that feel like they won't get out of your brain and you're trying to shake them off. Whatever it is, let it go. We'll do a few open mouth exhalations here. So inhale through the nose. Exhale a sigh through the mouth. Inhale through the nose. Exhale, let it out through the mouth. Let's do 3 more. Inhale. Exhale, release. 2 more. Inhale. Exhale, let it go. Last one. Breathe in. Breathe out. Now just return back to your natural breath. Notice what it feels like to be resting here in this moment. Maybe checking in with how your physical body feels. Noticing what you're feeling in the hips, in the inner thighs. And let the back of the spine and the torso relax into your mat. Soften the back of the skull. Relax the muscles of the face. And then draw your attention to your breath. Notice how smooth, fluid, and relaxed your breath is. Notice the ease at which you breathe. And then despite how easy it is to breathe and how relaxed your breath is, remember that your breath is powerful. Your breath has your prana, your life energy riding on it. Your breath provides nutrients, nourishment, energy, and life. The breath is an amazing thing. And so continue a steady, relaxed breath. And maybe you have your hands on your low belly or your hips, or maybe not. But imagine energetically sending your breath to your hips. And now this doesn't mean to physically manipulate and alter the breath. This is just a visualization. Imagine that nutrients, that nourishment, the energy, the life, the prana that rides on the breath. Send it all to your hips. Send all those good feelings, all the nourishment, all of that rides on the breath. Send it to the hips. Give them a little bit of extra love before we get to move them. Imagine sending that energy, that light, that love to your hips using your breath. take 3 breaths here. And then keeping your attention inward. And if it feels right for you, maybe take the next few moments to set an intention for your practice. Silently and slowly repeat that intention to allow it to settle in your heart. Start to deepen the breath. Fill your whole body with your breath. Imagine the breath traveling down to the toes, to the fingers, up to the crown of the head. And start to wiggle fingers and toes. Move the head side to side. And then we'll very slowly release out of this hip opener by bringing the hands to the outsides of the thighs. Even if it's just your fingers, we want to try to use the strength of the arms. The hips are so relaxed, they're not really ready to work. So bring your hands to the outsides of the thighs, and maybe just one leg at a time. Use the strength of your arms to draw your knees together like you're closing a book. Bring the feet flat onto the ground. Just rest for a breath or two. All right, so whatever props you were using, you can get them off to the side. All right, we are going to stay on our backs for a little bit longer. So allow your arms to maybe come out in opposite directions, or just alongside the body is fine, but palms up. Feet flat on the ground, knees bent, and we'll let the knees sway from side to side. So let your legs just rock and sway right to left. We won't be here long, but just a little bit of movement here for the spine. Now keep checking in with your breath throughout the practice. The hope is that the breath is smooth, relaxed, and fluid throughout the practice. And if that visualization technique helps you, know that you're welcome to use it in any pose, especially when we are taking poses and staying still in them. Maybe you use that. You send your breath to wherever you feel like it needs it, or wherever you are focusing on, whatever it is. All right, just let the legs go each side one more time. And then allow the legs to come back to the center. All right. Keeping the knees bent, feet flat, we'll walk the feet out a little bit wider so they're about mat distance apart. All 10 toes still forward. We'll move through the internal rotation of the hip. So we'll keep one leg still, but the other leg roll to the inside edge of the foot, like you're dropping to the big toe side, to the arch of the foot, like you're getting the inner thigh towards the mat. Slowly return it back to the center and switch sides. Rolling to the inside edge of the foot towards the big toe side, and then slowly return it back to the center. Keep alternating between your right and your left. Moving at a slow and controlled pace. Some of the poses that we'll be moving through today are quite deep for our hips and hip flexors. But that doesn't mean that we need to move quickly. It doesn't mean that it should make you make a face or wince. Those things mean you've gone too far. So we can be slow and controlled, but still deep and still really create change. But here, this should be fairly mild, just warming up. Again, just sort of saying hello to the hips, especially this internal rotation, because you maybe have not done this movement yet at all today. So let's do this one more time each side. And then just returning to the center, bring the feet back to about hip distance apart, take a breath. Inhale. Exhale, hug the knees into the chest. You can wrap your arms around your shins or the backs of your thighs, whatever feels good. Maybe you rock from side to side. One more moment here. Okay, and then we're going to come up to a seat, so you can rock through to the center or roll to the side. Come up to a comfortable seat. I always like to support my hips and sit on something. I think I'll just fold my blanket over. And I can talk about this for just a moment too, because this is about your hips. And I don't think I've said this in a long time. When you're sitting cross-legged, this sort of crisscross applesauce. If you're sitting here, a few things to kind of keep in mind. You want to cross mid-shin as opposed to mid-ankle or at the ankle. At the ankle is going to pull at the joint. So you want to, can you get your ankles or your feet sort of under the thighs or under the knees? And then this is more about the hips. We want your kneecaps lower, closer to the floor than your ASIS bones, than your hip bones. So this is tough to see when you just look down. You sort of need to be looking in front of a mirror or take a picture of yourself doing this to be able to sort of see this. But we want, again, the knees to be lower than the ASIS bones. And if that's not happening, that's when we know you've got to sit on a little bit more height. Or for me, this is not uncomfortable, but I actually like to take a different pose. And so then now my knees are low and my hips are nice and comfortable. So of course, the first thing is that you're comfortable. Second is that you start to look at sort of these secondary things. Okay. All right. So now that you're settled, you've got your foundation, you can let all of that relax. Let's focus on the spine. Sit up tall, lengthen up through the crown of the head. And we want the pelvis in neutral here to start. So you're neither dropping the belly down or drawing it up. It's in neutral. Lengthen, relax the shoulders, relax the arms. Take a breath. Okay, and then inhale, rock, excuse me, the pelvis forward, draw the ribs forward, lift the chest, lift the heart. You might even look up. Exhale, tuck the tailbone, draw the ribs back, chin to the chest, look down towards your belly. Move with your breath. Inhale, draw the belly forward, lift the chest, lift the heart, look up. Exhale, tuck the tailbone, ribs back, chin to the chest, look down. Just a few more of these. Inhale as you draw the belly forward, almost like you're pointing your belly button down. Exhale, tuck the tailbone like you're pointing your belly button up. So we do this action a lot, probably more than you realize. The tricky thing is transferring it to different poses. So we can do this in tabletop, cat and cow, easy, right? It's a little bit more challenging seated. It's going to be a little bit more challenging some with the lunges and when we've got our legs in totally different positions, but it's this sort of rocking back and forth. We're going to want to come back to this. Okay, do one more of each. Okay, and then return to the center. Again, back. So now the pelvis is in neutral, neither pointing down or up, right in neutral. Okay, lengthen up, relax the shoulders, take a breath. And then inhale, reach the fingertips up towards the sky, but keep shoulders soft. Exhale, bring the right hand down, sweep left fingertips over, reach to the side of the room. Inhale to the center, lengthen up. Exhale, switch sides. Left hand down, right fingertips reach. Move with your breath. Again, we're just doing a handful. So again, keeping the pelvis not only level, so it's not tipping forward or back, but it's also level in that it's not lifting up right or left. So neither the front or the back is hiking up, but neither the right or the left is hiking up. It's level and stable and grounded. It's our anchor, it's our base, it's our foundation. Okay, let's do one more each side. And then inhale, return to the center, lengthen the crown of the head up. Exhale, drop the arms, take a twist, turning over to the right. Inhale to the center, lengthen up through the crown of the head. Exhale, drop the arms, take the twist over to the left. Move with your breath. Now again, we're keeping the pelvis grounded and anchored. Again, the right or the left side is not hiking up. But now what you'll be tempted to do, instead of allowing it to hike up, you'll be tempted to push one hip forward. Try to keep them still. Again, try to keep that strong foundation, that strong base. So then we're protecting the pelvis, but then we're also making sure that the stretch really is in the spine. Again, shoulders relaxed throughout this. Let's do one more each side. And then inhale, return to the center. Exhale, let the arms come all the way down. All right, we're gonna set up in tabletop. And we're gonna be in this tabletop for a little bit, so I would maybe suggest patting your knees if that's something that, that your knees like and that your knees ask of you. Mine sure do. Okay, so I'm gonna grab onto my blocks. If you got blocks, I would grab onto them as well. We'll set up in sort of this lifted tabletop, knees may be supported, hands on the blocks. I like to start with the blocks at the medium height. All right, let's start the left foot forward. Let's start by stepping the left foot forward. So step that left foot forward in between the blocks, in between the hands. We're starting with this low lunge here. The low lunge half splits sort of routine here that I'm very much a fan of. Okay, but we start, again, a strong foundation. We push everything down into the ground, especially the left heel. But we're even pushing the right knee, the shin, the top of the right foot. If it doesn't come down into the ground, if your ankle looks a little bit more like this, that's okay. But we do want to push down with that back foot. So pushing down with the legs, reaching the hips up, tucking the tailbone, belly button towards the face. Inhale. Exhale as you allow the hips to come back. Now you might slide the hands back as well, but allow the hips to come back and reach the left toes to the sky, straightening that left leg. Feel it in the back of your left leg. We're gonna move with our breath. Inhale as you shift forward to this low lunge. Exhale, shift back, half split. Straighten the left leg, reach left toes to the sky. Inhale as you shift forward. Exhale, draw it back. Slow and controlled. So as you shift forward, you're feeling something in the front of your right hip. Hello, hip flexors. And as you're shifting back, you're feeling it in your hamstrings. We'll get into the hamstrings later with forward folds and down dog, but one at a time in this way usually feels really nice. Okay, let's do about 2 more just like this. Now here I want you to think about keeping your spine fairly neutral. We're not really focused too much on the pelvis except for when it comes forward, kind of tucking the tailbone, but otherwise, really just focused on the legs. Good, and then the next time you come forward to that low lunge, now focus here a little bit. Tuck the tailbone again. This is really the only time in this sort of back and forth where we've got to focus. When we come forward, tuck the tailbone, belly button towards your face. Let's stay for about 2 breaths just like this. Okay, and then we'll step back up in tabletop. So just let the hips come back so you can eventually let that left knee come down. Maybe just let the hips sway from side to side, maybe roll out the wrists, give yourself a moment or 2 of a break before we switch sides. All right, And then we will step into the second side. So step that right foot forward in between the hands. Again, I always generally have the blocks on the medium height, but whatever height you need, we want to make sure that your torso is not resting on your thigh. It can touch, that's okay, but we want to make sure that the weight of your body is in your arms and your feet pushing into the ground, not letting your torso just sort of rest on your thigh. Okay, so push down into the ground. The right heel is pushing down, left knee, left shin, top of the left foot. Inhale. Exhale, drop back, half splits. Draw the hips back, reach the right toes to the sky, straighten the right leg. Inhale, shift forward. Exhale, drop back. And think about your hips going straight forward, straight back. Oftentimes when people do this, their hips sort of track on this like C shape or like this diagonal. Can you allow your hips to go straight forward and straight back without any sort of swaying side to side? Again, just creating more stability, mostly for the pelvis, lower back, things like that. Okay, and shoulders are relaxed, but the chest is lifted. Keeping the back flat. And just thinking about tucking the tailbone when the hips come forward, but otherwise, you don't really need to focus too much on the pelvis or the tailbone. Let's do about 2 more, just like this. And then the next time you come forward, we'll just come back into tabletop. So allow that right knee to come on back. And again, maybe let the hips sway, roll out the wrists, whatever you need. 1 or 2 more breaths. Okay. So if you've supported under your knees, we're gonna come back to this. We're gonna come up to standing for just a moment, but then we're gonna need to drop the knee right back down. So I'm gonna leave the support here, but when we walk forward, if you're gonna do that, just be really aware that it is there. Don't forget that it's there, okay? So in tabletop, hands down on the mat now. You can set the blocks off to the side. We're gonna need them in a second, but you can bring them closer to the top 2 corners of your mat. From tabletop, we'll walk the hands 1 whole handprint closer to the top of the mat. Spread the fingers, hook the toes under. Inhale. Exhale, slowly arrive in downward facing dog. We'll take just a few breaths here. Maybe you pedal out the heels. Notice how this feels in the hamstrings. Backs of the legs opening up again. But also notice that your hip flexors have that crease. So this is not a hip flexor stretch, but it is a hamstring stretch, opening the backs of the legs. Let's take 1 more breath here. So this is what I was talking about. Be aware if you've got that blanket or prop still there. Deeply bend your knees. Inhale, look forward. Exhale, travel forward, walking your feet forward into forward fold Uttanasana. We'll all arrive in forward fold Uttanasana. Again, take a few breaths here. So again, another hamstring stretch, opening through the backs of the legs. Maybe your knees are softly bent or deeply bent, or maybe your legs are pretty straight. Really listen to those hamstrings. And listen to your lower back, mid back, upper back, but just let the head hang, let the arms hang. Maybe you even sway. Maybe you shake your head yes, shake your head no. Let's take 2 breaths here. Okay, now from forward fold Uttanasana, inhale, lift up halfway, lengthen the spine. Exhale, fold forward. Push the heels down. Inhale, rise all the way up. Circle the arms. We're gonna just keep moving. We're gonna do a few half sun salutations. So exhale, fold forward, hinge at the hips, fold at the hip flexors, eventually arriving in forward fold Uttanasana. Inhale, lift up halfway, lengthen the spine. Exhale, fold forward, rounding through the upper body. Push the heels down. Inhale, rise up. Make the hamstrings do some work as you rise. Let's do 2 more. Half sun salutations. Exhale, fold forward. Hinge at the hips, at the hip flexors. Forward fold. Inhale, lift up halfway. Lengthen the spine. Exhale, fold. Inhale, rise. 1 more. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, lift halfway. Exhale, fold. Inhale, rise. Rising all the way up, fingertips to the sky, maybe even look up and then slowly bring your hands to your heart. Pause in Tadasana, take a deep breath. Okay, all right. We're gonna do just 1 standing pose here. We're gonna take tree pose. So again, being aware if you've still got something on your mat, all I'm gonna do is just turn to face you. But find a nice flat spot underneath you. Feet hip distance, toes forward, shift the weight back into your heels. You can wiggle your toes. Shift your weight into your right foot. Create a kickstand with the left. So big toe on the ground, heel above the ankle. Now check in everywhere. Pelvis is level in that it's not tipping forward or back. It's also not hiking one hip up or down, right? So it's level in all directions. It's neutral. It's in its neutral alignment, okay? And you can wiggle your right toes. Choose wherever you'd like your arms to be. And look at something up and away, something that won't move, a dristi. Think about lifting up, reaching up, looking up, and then maybe slide that foot up. Maybe a little, maybe a lot. But maintain that neutral alignment in the pelvis and in the hips. Lift the chest up, relax the shoulders. Now think about opening this left hip a little. Can you keep your pelvis in neutral, but draw the left knee to the left a little bit more? Feel that through the inner part of the thigh and the left leg. This is gonna help open through the hip flexors. Let's take 2 breaths here, just like this. Tree pose, Vrikshasana. And then close the hip. So move that left leg slowly so that both kneecaps point forward, and then release the leg down. And then maybe with that right ankle, you roll the ankle out or let the hip sway. Just take a little bit of movement before we switch sides. Okay, and then same thing, second side. So feet hip distance, weight back in the heels. Shift your weight into the left, kickstand the right, check in here. You can wiggle your left toes. Your pelvis is level and in neutral in all directions. Relax the shoulders, place the arms where you like, find your dristi. And then maybe, but maybe not, you slide that foot up. And then again, check in, so keep checking in. Again, with the pelvis, making sure that one hip isn't hiking up, or that it's tipping forward. Oftentimes because the hip flexors are so tight, they pull our pelvis so that the belly button wants to point down to the floor. So just make sure it's in neutral. Take some deep breaths, really ground through that left heel. And then can you open the right inner thigh? Can you keep your belly button pointing forward, but open the right knee to the right? Feel that stretch through the inner thigh. Let's take 2 breaths here. And slowly close the hip. Both kneecaps will point in the same direction, and then slowly release that leg down and take any release that you need. Maybe roll the ankle, maybe let the hips sway and pop, and maybe roll the shoulders, whatever you need. Just another breath. Okay, let's come on back to the top of the mat. Take a strong Tadasana, ground through the heels, really push the feet down, stand up tall. Stand up as tall as you can possibly stand. Soften the shoulders, soften the arms. Take a breath. And then inhale, sweep the arms, fingertips reach to the sky, maybe you even look up. Exhale, hinge at the hips, fold forward, Uttanasana. Inhale, lift up halfway. Exhale, step the right foot back. So I'm going to grab onto my blocks, and we're going to step the right foot back. Okay. So we're going to start in a high lunge, but eventually we are going to drop that back knee. So sort of center yourself so that knee is over that prop if you've got it. Okay. But first, we're in this high lunge. So each foot is in its own lane of traffic. It's not like you're on a tightrope. All 10 toes are forward. Right heel is off the ground. Deeply bend the left knee. Softly bend the right knee. Bring your hands to the top of the left thigh to help lift your torso. We're going to take a crescent lunge. We're just going to relax the arms because the focus is not the arms here. Okay, so what I want for you is we're going to stretch this hip flexor again. So really lift the right heel up off the ground. Bend the right knee and tuck the tailbone. Belly button towards the face. Get rid of the crease, get rid of the wrinkle, get rid of the fold. Lengthen from knee to hip. And when I say hip, I mean like the top of the hip. Like even, I'm wearing high-waisted pants. I mean like above the waistband of your pants. So not way down here. I want you to lengthen from the knee, along the quads, the quadriceps, the tops of the thighs, through the hip flexors. Tucking the tailbone, relax your shoulders. Arms can be wherever they like. I just kind of want them down for now, but you can lift them up. Let's take 3 breaths here. Okay, and then inhale. Exhale, bring the hands back down onto the blocks and drop that right knee down onto the ground. Okay. All right, so we are going to keep focusing on opening through the hips and opening through the inner thighs and the hip flexors. Now we're going to take a little different of a variation. So we took this low lunge already with the with the hamstrings. Then we just did the high lunge. Now what we're going to do, instead of elevating the back knee, we're going to lift the front leg. So place one of your blocks down on its lowest height, and you're going to put it under your left foot. So you're going to step on the block with your left foot with the block on its lowest height. Okay. Now this other block, I'm going to probably have it in my left hand to help me lift up a little bit. Right hand sort of, this is a little tricky. You can have your hands on your thigh, hands on your hips, hands on blocks. Kind of one less prop here, okay? But just finding somewhere to be, and then lifting the chest, relaxing the shoulders, tuck the tailbone, belly button to the face. Get rid of that wrinkle, get rid of that crease, get rid of that fold. And maybe this feels the same as the last one. Maybe this feels a little bit more intense or just different. Or maybe having the foot on the block is too intense or too different, or just you don't like it. You don't have to do it. You can get rid of the block, that's fine. This is just a different way. It should feel a little bit different. In my body, it feels a little bit more intense and just a little different. The stretch sort of shifted a bit. So any one of those is fine. But let's stay here for about 3 breaths. Now we're going to lower down, but have your left foot step over to the left of the block. So it's going to come to the outside of the block. Now, bring your hands on the blocks to the inside of the left foot. So instead of framing the foot. You've got both hands to the inside of the left foot. And I like the blocks on the highest height. But again, everyone's body is different. You do what feels best. So this is where you've got options. Now, if you keep your hips a little bit higher and you focus on tucking your tailbone, you should still keep feeling something through your hip flexors. But now we can start to get into the left thigh and the left part of the hip. So dial your left toes out. I'm not sure if you can see this. Dial your left toes out to about a 45-degree angle, like you're reaching your left toes almost for the front left corner of the room. And then allow the left knee to fall away from you, like it's falling away from your torso, away from your shoulder. Again, I'm not sure how well you can see this, but something like that. Okay. Now, and most of you are probably familiar with this pose and where you can lower your torso down, but this is where I want you to think about your options. If you lower your torso, which you're welcome to do, you could get rid of the blocks, you could come to your forearms, you could start to lower your torso towards the floor. It will deepen the stretch in your left leg, but it will most likely reduce the stretch in your right leg. So your call, your choice, what you want to do. I would, in my own body, it feels more comfortable to be upright here, to just really focus on my hip flexor. But if you want to lower, you're welcome to lower. I want you to find a comfortable stretch where you feel something, at least a little something in each hip. And also check in with your lower back, because when we allow our belly button to point down towards the thighs, then we start to arch the back. So if you're not focusing on the hip flexor, that's fine, but try not to arch the back too much. Protect your lower back. So this is called lizard lunge. Let's stay here for 3 breaths. If you lowered your torso, slowly start to come on back up. Maybe grab onto the blocks again. So start by lifting your upper body, lifting your torso, and then plant that left foot down on the ground. And then just slide that left leg and the hips back. We'll just come to tabletop. Give yourself some time. Let the hips move around. Ooh wee. I don't know about you, but my right and my left feel very, very, very different from each other right now. So maybe move around. See how they feel? Roll out the wrists. Again, let's take just a few moments. Okay. All right. Now from here, let's bring the hands back. I'm sorry, grab onto your blocks. We're gonna step the right foot forward. Step the right foot forward in between the blocks. We have to start back at the top, and we're gonna hook the back toes under. Hook the back toes under, lift that knee up. Now we're not lifting that knee up all the way. That left knee is not gonna be straight. That left leg is not gonna be straight. That's all right. Deeply bend the right knee, bring the hands to the top of the right thigh, lift the torso. So we're starting in this high lunge, this sort of crescent lunge. Again, arms can be up or whatever you need. I really just want to focus on my hips. So I'm just letting my arms relax, give them a break. The focus is lifting the left heel, bending the left knee, tucking the tailbone. And if you want to try it on your own, you can think about if you were to not do those things, what happens in your pelvis? What happens in your lower back and your hip flexor? There might not be a crease. Like right now when my left leg is straight, there's not that fold or that crease in my left hip flexor, but it's not as long as if I do those things. So again, think about we're trying to lengthen from knee to the hip or the top of the waistband of your pants. And so tuck the tailbone, belly button to the face. Soften the shoulders, soften the arms. Notice this feeling. Do you feel it in the hip crease? Do you feel it more in the thigh? One is not right, one's not wrong. They're both just two spaces that are connected and both get tight for the same reason. 3 breaths here. Okay, inhale. Exhale, bring the hands down and drop that left knee down onto the ground. Okay, so low lunge. I've already been here, but again, we're going to take this different option where we're going to drop one block down to its lowest height and place the right foot on it. Now again, if this doesn't feel good, don't take it. That's totally fine. It's just another variation, another option. And I like to kind of bring that other block up to its highest height. Use it as a little bit of a kickstand. But again, we want to be more upright. This one isn't so much about being forward. Tuck the tailbone. And once you've got that tuck of the tailbone, if you want to let your hips come forward, you can, but I don't think you're going to need it. So rooting down, pushing the right heel down, the left shin, top of the left foot, tuck the tailbone, belly button to the face, relax the shoulders. 3 deep breaths here. Now we're going to slowly release out of this, but we're going to let the right foot step off the block over to the right. So it's closer to the edge of your mat. And then grab onto both blocks again, and your blocks are to the inside of the right foot. Okay, and again, I like them on the highest height, but your call. Now you could stay just like this. Think about tucking the tailbone. Maybe just this step over opens enough for you here. Or maybe with the right foot, let it dial out to about a 45-degree angle. Let the right knee fall away from you. And you'll start to feel something here. Okay, and maybe that's all you're looking for and you're happy here. Maybe if you're looking for more in this right leg, you lower down, drop to the elbows, get rid of the blocks, whatever you need. But I do think that as you lower your torso, you're going to reduce the stretch in your left hip flexor. Doesn't mean one is better or worse. You just do what you need today on this side in this moment. So choose what feels good. And again, if you're upright, if you're in the position that I'm in, think about tucking the tailbone. And again, it's not about letting the hips sag down. This isn't a back bend. We're not looking for anything other than really a neutral spine. It's not about letting the hips sag. We want to tuck the tailbone, have stability, be in control of the pose, but allow the pose to do its job. 3 deep breaths here. If you lowered your torso, come on back up. Grab onto the blocks, come up to your hands, whatever you need. And then we'll slowly plant the right foot back down onto the ground. Let the hips come back, let the right knee come back. Give yourself a break. One more breath. All right. Okay. So you can set your blocks off to the side. We will need them at some point. So maybe you want to place them back closer towards the back of your mat, so when you're laying on your back, you can grab one. Again, supported bridge, that's what's coming. And then I'm gonna take my blanket and I'm gonna bring it closer to the top of my mat, because I'm gonna probably let my forehead rest on it, because we're gonna come down onto our stomachs, but actually let's rest on our forearms for just a moment, almost like we're in Sphinx pose. Okay, so we've been getting into the hips and the hip flexors, and I mentioned this earlier, your quads. Your quads are the muscles that run along the top of the thigh from the knee to the hip. Quads are also very tight. They're not necessarily tight for the same reasons, but they're sort of connected to the hip flexors, and so when the hip flexors get tight, the quads get tight, and so we're gonna stretch the quads. We've already done it a few times, but we're gonna stretch them a little bit more here. So we're gonna keep the right arm down on the ground. I like to have the right shoulder under the right arm, but allow the right forearm to sort of move at a diagonal, like your right fingers are reaching for the top left corner of your mat, so it's a little bit more stable of a base. Push that right arm down into the ground to lift the chest, relax the shoulders, and then slowly bend your left knee, bringing your heel into the back of the thigh, and then with the left arm, reach around and grab onto that leg. So you might grab onto the shin, you might grab onto your pant leg, you might grab onto the top of the foot. Traditionally, we grab onto the top of the foot like where shoelaces would be. Whatever you can grab onto, and we're gonna draw that heel in towards the back of the thigh. Now, it might touch, it might not touch, that doesn't matter. What we want is an opening from the knee to about the top of the hip. So you're not gonna feel it in the exact same spot, in that crease, in that actual fold where we feel the hip flexor stretch. Again, this is more of a quad stretch. Now, because my quads are a little bit more open, I'm gonna be comfortable lowering my torso here in this pose. So that's what I'm gonna do, but you do not have to do that. I think maybe I won't even actually use the blanket. What I'm just gonna do is kind of pivot that right elbow out and let my forehead rest on the back of my right hand. Now again, you can keep your torso lifted or you can lower it. What I want you to focus on is keeping your inner thighs fairly close together. That left knee is gonna wanna splay over to the left. Don't let it. Keep the thighs fairly close together. Draw the heel in towards the back of the thigh so you accomplish a comfortable stretch. Again, nothing that makes you think, ow, wince, or make a face. That's too much, and you're not benefiting from poses that make you do those things. So a comfortable stretch where you feel that length. Let's take a few breaths here. Two more breaths. Okay, and then slowly release your hand. Let that left foot come back down onto the ground. Okay, now we're gonna take another hip opening pose. All right. So from where you're at, you can come back up onto your forearms if you were lowered down. Now this one, we're gonna keep the right leg as it is now and as it was before. The left leg, it's gonna come over to the left, almost like you're in tree pose, but on your stomach. So that left kneecap is gonna face over to the left. The left knee will more or less be at a right angle. The bottom of the foot faces the back of the mat. The left toes point over to the left. So your, again, left knee makes a right angle. Okay. So you're gonna feel this through the left inner thigh and through the inner part of the hip. I want your right ASIS bone on the ground. Your left one will not be. That's okay. Now again, you could stay upright and lifted. This one I also like to lower down. You take what's comfortable. It's not more intense to lay down. I think this is generally how most students like this pose. And you might stack your hands or stack fists and rest your forehead. You might just rest your forehead right down if it's comfortable to kind of stretch through the neck. You might turn and look over your left shoulder. Now we're gonna stay here for several breaths. So allow this to be comfortable. You might have to sort of slide that left leg around and sort of move it to find that stretch. If you're finding that it's not intense enough, think about sliding your left knee up, like your left knee is almost reaching for your left shoulder or like the front left corner of your mat. If it's too intense, slide the left knee down so it's closer to the back of your mat. But find a pose that feels good in that left hip, that left inner thigh. Let gravity do its job and settle in. Let's take 3 deep breaths here. Okay. If your head is turned, return your head to neutral. Place your forehead down on your hands. Keeping your left leg heavy, so in contact with the ground, slide it along the length of your mat so it comes back down. Eventually the tops of the feet, tops of the legs resting on the ground, both legs long. Take a breath. And then bend your knees so your feet are reaching up for the sky, but thighs are still heavy on the ground. And let your legs just sort of sway. Your feet sway and move right to left. Maybe they even do circles. One more moment here. Okay. All right. And then we'll start with the second side. So we're going to start with the quad stretch. So let's again come back up to our forearms. So for both of these, you can be on your forearms or you can be lower. Choose what feels good. Okay, but left elbow is going to be under the left shoulder. Left forearm sort of at a diagonal. So your left fingers reach for your right corner of your mat, front right corner of the mat. Push that left forearm down to lift the chest, protect the shoulder. Bend your right knee, heel towards the back of the thigh, and then reach around with that right arm. So again, you can grab any part of the leg that you need, but typically we grab onto the top of the foot like where shoelaces would go. And then you gently draw that right heel in towards the back of your right thigh to open the quads, the tops of the thighs. Now I mentioned that your quads don't typically get tight in exactly the same way your hip flexors do, and that's partially true and partially not true. After I said it, I thought, well, technically. So quads and hip flexors both get tight from walking, running, bike riding, the elliptical, anything like that, quads and hip flexors are working. But your quads don't get tight from sitting. Your quads don't get tight from sleeping on your side or that sort of, those sort of the really everyday stuff that we're doing a lot. The quads don't get tight then. Quads get tight from working. Okay, so you might stay here. You might lower down, letting your forehead rest or your cheek rest, whatever you need. But again, I want the emphasis in the legs. So think about keeping the inner thighs a little bit closer together. They don't have to be squeezing, but that knee, that right knee shouldn't be all the way over. Keep the thighs a little bit closer together. Think about your knees being about hip distance. And then drawing that right heel into the back of the thigh. Maybe the heel touches the thigh, maybe it doesn't really matter. We're just opening that space. Opening through the quads, and then relax your pelvis. You don't have to think about pointing your belly button in any direction, tuck or untuck. Just let it relax. This is a little different again. This is the quads. Let's stay for 3 breaths. slowly release your right hand away from your right leg. Let the top of the right foot come down to the ground. Just relax both arms. Okay, and then we'll all come up to the forearms. Okay, and we'll come into this hip stretch. This is called half frog. And again, it's sort of like tree pose, but on your belly. So left leg's gonna stay where it is, right leg, it's gonna sort of swing over to the right. So your right inner thigh is resting on the ground. So your left ASIS bone touching the ground. Mine feels like it's pushing into the ground without me having to push into it. It's really making contact with the ground. My right one is not. That's okay. The right inner thigh is going to feel a stretch. We want to hopefully get that right knee at a right angle. Inner part of the foot touching on the ground, right toes to the right. So again, you can keep your upper body lifted. You can stay in this sort of back bend. This really is about your back. So listen to your back. My back doesn't care for this, so I'm going to lower down. And you might stack your hands, forehead. You might grab onto your blanket and then check in with your hip once you've lowered. If you're looking for it to be more intense, slide the right knee like it's reaching up towards the top of your mat, like it's reaching for your right shoulder. Or if you're looking for something that's less intense, slide it down, slide it away towards the back of your mat. Okay. And then again, maybe you keep your neck in neutral. Maybe you turn to rest and look over your right shoulder. But this is a pose where gravity is doing the work, so don't fight it. Fighting against gravity is an uphill battle, literally, I suppose. And it's not worth it. You're not going to benefit. You're not going to win. Just let it go. And maybe if it helps, visualize sending your breath to your right hip. Visualize your breath, that nutrients, that light, that energy going to your right hip. Let's take 3 more breaths here. And then if your head is turned, slowly return your neck to neutral so you're resting your forehead down. Keeping the right leg heavy and in contact with the ground, slide it so you're lengthening that right leg so then it eventually can come back alongside the left. Tops of the feet down, rest for a moment. And then again, bend the knees, let the legs sway, maybe do circles. Your ASIS bones will kind of rock, your pelvis will kind of rock. That's good. Just another moment here. Okay. And then let the tops of the feet come down onto the ground. Bring your hands under your shoulders. Now, to protect your lower back, tuck your tailbone, belly button towards the face. I know it's tough here. Belly button towards the face. Push the knees down and slowly rise to tabletop. So when you rise from laying on your stomach, we want to keep your spine in neutral then. So instead of lifting up off the ground sort of in this wave-like action, try to lift your torso like keeping it engaged, right? Okay, we're coming down onto our backs. And you don't need anything under the back of your head. Again, we're coming to supported bridge, so no support under the back of the head. And have a block close by. All right. So come on down onto your back, knees bent, feet flat. Grab onto your block. Push your feet into the ground. Inhale, lift your hips. Slide the block on its lowest height under your sacrum and let your sacrum rest heavy on the block. Your sacrum is not the same as your lower back. It's south of your lower back. It's below your lower back. It's below the waistband of your pants. Make sure it's in a comfortable spot. Okay. Now, bridge pose. So notice here in bridge pose, this is more, as we are here, right, in this variation, this is more about your spine. Notice that we're opening the front of the torso. If you were to, whether you can see or not, you might not be able to see, you might have some stuff in the way. The front of your shirt, the front of your torso, there's probably no wrinkles, right? It's all lengthened. We're opening the front of the space, but there's this little bit of crease here in the hip flexor. So this isn't a hip flexor stretch yet, but we're gonna get there. Okay. So from right where you're at, inhale. Exhale, hug the right leg in towards your belly very slowly and softly. Start by hugging onto the back of the thigh. Just very loosely have your fingers wrapping around the back of the thigh. We're not hugging the thigh in too tight. Okay. So the thigh is kind of away from our belly. We just lifted the foot up off the ground more or less. Okay, now listening to your back, start to slowly slide the left foot, or sort of crawl it, the left foot away from the block, away from you, lengthening that left leg along the mat, almost like the left side of your body is in Shavasana. Now for me, because I have knee issues and I have hamstring issues and I have lower back issues, I like to keep that left leg long, engaged, and the foot flexed. I'm okay with it being relaxed if it feels okay for you. But I would also say if you're not sure and if they feel the same, I would take the engagement. We're not going to be here too long. So now we're opening the front of the left hip. Now we're opening that hip flexor. Notice that not only is there not a crease, we've actually taken this sort of rainbow shape in the hip flexor. It's actually really being stretched. Now, notice your pelvis. Notice if you just ever so slightly rock it forward. What happens if you try to point your belly button just a little bit towards your thighs? It's going to deepen the stretch in your back, lessen the stretch in your hips. Now what happens if you point your belly button a little bit more towards your face? Maybe you even hug the right leg in a little bit more. Maybe bring the hands to the shin and draw that right knee in towards your chest. Now you'll point the belly button to the face, and now you'll feel more in the hip flexor. And maybe everything that I just said, you're thinking, no, I'm not. I don't feel it there. It's pretty subtle, so it's okay. Or maybe you're thinking, subtle? This is intense. Everyone's body is so different, so this really will feel different for everyone. But what I want is this to be comfortable. Whether you're feeling a lot or a little, and whether you're feeling it in your hips or your back, it should be comfortable. Okay. So find a comfortable variation here. Let your shoulders relax. Let's take 3 breaths here. Okay. Now slowly slide that left foot in towards the block, in towards the rest of your body, planting the left foot, bending the left knee. And then very slowly release that right foot, let the right foot come back down to the ground. We're back in a supported bridge with both feet flat on the ground, knees bent. Notice how you feel. Okay, inhale. Exhale, gently hug the left thigh in towards your belly. You're just wrapping your fingers around the back of the left thigh. We're not hugging it in tight. I'm going to keep my arms straight. My thigh is pretty far away from my belly for now, for starters. And once you feel stable and settled there, crawl or slide the right foot away from you. My mat is like super sticky, so I can't like slide it. I sort of crawl it, but that's okay. Lengthening that right leg. Again, the leg can be relaxed if that's all right for you. I just prefer it to be engaged in my body. But we do want the right leg long. Notice how that feels in the front of your right hip. And then maybe you play with these actions a little bit. Slow and soft and really subtle. We're not looking for large movements. But what happens if you arch your back, point your belly button towards your thighs, even just the teeny tiniest little bit? You're going to feel more of a back bend, less in your hip flexors. What happens if you tuck your tailbone, point your belly button to your face? That allows inevitably the knee to come in a little bit tighter. Maybe that feels good, maybe it doesn't. But again, settle into a version that feels the most productive for you. If you want to focus on your back, go ahead and focus on your back. Find something that works for you. Find the right combination. Breathe into it. 3 deep breaths. Okay, and then very slowly slide or crawl that right foot in so it's a little bit closer to you, drawing it in towards the block, and then eventually bending the right knee, planting the right foot, and then very slowly releasing the left leg, letting the left foot come back down, both feet flat, knees bent, supported bridge where we started. Even here, what's it feel like to sort of tilt your pelvis? Take a breath. Now push the feet down. Inhale, lift your hips. Point your belly button towards your face. Slide the block off to the side. Keep the tuck of the tailbone as you exhale to lower. Belly button to the face, to the face, to the face, to the face as you lower. Lower your spine, lower your torso. Come to constructive resting pose. Feet wide, knees knock in. Take some deep breaths. Now inhale. Exhale, hug your knees in towards your chest. You can wrap your arms around your thighs or your shins. You can hug in loosely or tightly. You can stay still. You can rock. You can take happy baby. Take a few moments to move in any way that feels good before we settle into Shavasana. So in your own time, start to settle into Shavasana. Make yourself comfortable. Coming into Shavasana, final relaxation. And allowing the back side of your body to rest. Let the back side feel heavy, grounded, and like it's melting into the mat. Let the front side feel light and lifted. Feeling the breath circulate through the center, creating this balance between the back side and the front side, and even the outside and the inside. Just allowing everything to relax. Allow everything to soften. Slowly deepen your breath. And as you deepen your breath, create soft movements throughout your body. Let your head rock from side to side. Run your thumbs over the rest of your fingers as you wiggle your toes. Roll wrists and ankles. Move arms and legs. And reach your arms overhead, stretching as if you just woke up from a long nap. Take a deep breath in. And as you breathe out, hug your knees in towards your chest. And slowly roll over onto either side in a tucked fetal position. Using the strength of both arms, push down into the ground and come up to a comfortable seat. And take a moment here to thank yourself. You made it to your mat today. And maybe reflect on your intention. Loka samasta sukhi no bhavantu. May all beings everywhere be happy and free. And may the thoughts, words, and actions of my life contribute in some way to the happiness and freedom for all. Now let's join our hands together in front of the heart in Anjali Mudra. To seal our practice, we'll chant the sound of Om one time. Let's start with a deep and clearing breath. Inhale for Om. The light or the good in me acknowledges, respects, and bows to the light or the good in you. Namaste. Thank you so much for joining me. And again, thank you, Marty, for that suggestion. I have really enjoyed creating the sequence and doing it when I come back from walks because my hip flexors are tight and sore. But again, think about ways that you can open your hip flexors in everyday life. Again, for example, instead of being in a tight, or even on the couch, even if you're not a side sleeper, if you're, kind of balled up on the couch or whatever, can you expand it a little bit more? I know we just got out of winter, and so February we were so tight and cold, but can you open things up in everyday life, right? I also have a few articles I really like sharing with people who have questions about hip flexors. I will find them and link them either in the comment, in the description, or something. So for my really gung-ho hip flexor people, I'll give you all the knowledge I have. So, or I'll try to. So read it, don't read it, whatever you need to do, but keep moving, stay safe, and thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.